Welcome to the No Ordinary Cloth podcast, where we explore innovations bubbling up at the intersection of textiles, emerging tech, sustainability, and craft. I'm your host, Millie Tharakin, a textile researcher and innovator. Join me as I sit down with pioneers who are radically reimagining the very way we make, use, and remake textiles. As we kick off 2026, I want to wish you all a fabulous new year, one where your curiosity, creativity, and collaborative efforts flourish and bear fruits. And as a collective, I hope this can be a pivotal year where we create the ripples and waves needed to radically transform the textile industry itself. So cheers to 2026. For today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Charles Ross. Charles is a rock star when it comes to performance sportswear design. To say he's a specialist is an understatement. He has played a pivotal role in shaping the future of technical apparel, outdoor wear, and sustainable textiles. As a lecturer at the Royal College of Art, he has taught and inspired the next generation of designers for over 2 decades, shaping talents at brands like Patagonia, the North Face and Adidas. Passionate about sustainability, Charles is known for championing the concept of sustainability through longevity. We'll go into this in a lot of detail today, so stick around. He's been an advocate for durability and circularity way before it was a thing. The aim of the podcast was to focus on emotional durability, but Charles is so knowledgeable about so many areas of textiles. So we go on wonderful little detours exploring areas like designing for longevity, circular business models, looking after your washing machine, and also how textiles have become less evil over the years. It was an absolutely inspiring conversation. His passion for textile and expertise just oozes out of him so effortlessly. I don't think I've ever laughed and learned so much while interviewing someone. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I've enjoyed making it for you. Hey, Charles. Warm welcome to the No Ordinary Cloth podcast. Absolutely thrilled to have you with us today, not just because you're a bit of a legend in the outdoor and sportswear industry, but because you wanted to discuss about a theme that I've been quietly exploring. And to be honest, I was just thrilled to find someone else who wanted to talk about it. For the listeners, the theme of our episode today is quite different to what we've done so far in the podcast, which has been mainly looking at new materials and emerging technologies that are transforming the fashion and textile industry. But on this episode, we're going to be exploring another layer of sustainability and circularity that we haven't discussed as much, and that is emotional durability. And I believe this is a really important factor in our drive to keep products in use for longer and to design better. And we need to be talking a lot more about this. If you're not familiar with this topic, please stick around because I know Charles has a lot of light to shed on this and go away with lots to think about. All right, Charles, that's enough of me. You're going to do the rest of the talking for today. And I'm looking forward to exploring this idea, this theme of emotional durability for sustainability and circularity in fashion. When I got started, and as I did a bit of research on you, I came across your mantra. And that was, in quotes, sustainability through longevity. So over your 30-year career, you've been a champion for sustainability and you've been advocating circular approach to textile production and consumption for decades. So what does sustainability through longevity mean to you, and how do you see it shaping the future of fashion and sportswear design?
Well, Millie, thank you for inviting me on. I like going to the more edgy podcasts rather than the core middle ones, because I've hit that middle-aged stage of life. I have grey hair, so I should just be doing proper things. But that's not where the interesting stuff happens. So to answer a couple of questions at once, I have been teaching for over a quarter of a century, and 90% of the questions, 18 out of 20 questions that come to me from my students are, yes, Charles, but how can we do it better? So they have very much turned me around. I am one of those dinosaurs. And I was really lucky in the early days when I first joined the outdoor apparel industry to work for Sarah Howcroft, who then went on to become an environmental consultant. So I've always had that somewhere, and it's just developed more and more. But specifically for emotional durability, I work in the area of performance sportswear design. So if you want to work for Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, Patagonia, Arc'teryx, the North Face, Bergkamp, whomever, you might well have to suffer me at some stage because I work with postgraduates. And we always talk durability in those fields, but it's known as physical durability. So we put materials on a Martindale machine, which is a rubbing machine. We see their rip strengths, and the thinking has evolved an awful lot more. And I would say the two biggest people to bounce ideas off in my life on this have come from Mark Shaler and also Katie Beverley. And for both of them, we have talked about the subject of emotional durability. Now, emotional durability is a hard subject to get your head around. So I talk about, or rather Mark talks about the reverse of it. He talks about emotional obsolescence. So how long until you no longer love the garment? Emotional durability to me is how long do you love that garment for and you're not tempted away by something new and shiny. And quite often in performance sportswear, it doesn't look so new and shiny, but it's got a greater technical background. So it tells you it's more waterproof or more permeable or stretchier. That's the subject. It's actually come alive this decade as well, because the author Alec Leach has written a book called The World is on Fire, but we're still buying shoes. And that addresses the subject of something called cultural durability. And when you're as old as me, you remember flares were in the first time around. But when I started to buy my own clothes in the second half of the 80s, we were all into drain pipes. So that's cultural durability. So what's acceptable in the community that you live in? And there's a fourth durability, which we all know about, that we don't really consider a durability, but it's a massive durability. It's fit durability. And when you get old, things go south on your body, so you need slightly larger fits. But it is easier to explain about when you have growing children. They will grow out of apparel before they wear it out. So the durabilities, traditionally people talk physical durability, then there's cultural durability, there's fit durability, but especially chats with Katie and Mark, we agree the most influential durability, or the durability that really decides, is emotional durability. And if I accelerate to almost the takeaway of this session, every year this millennium, the individual impact of garments have gone down if you want to measure the footprints, which is a great move because the textile industry is seen as terribly wasteful and having lots of bad sides, but the impacts do go down. The hiccup is that we're buying more stuff. Clothing has become relatively cheaper over the decades, ever since the 1970s. So we have twice the amount of stuff that we had from the noughties at the moment. So if you were to measure at the millennium, we have about 2.5 times the amount of clothing from there. Between 1970 and the millennium, we actually doubled what we owned as well. And if you go right back to the 1950s, people didn't so much have wardrobes in that they had pegs in their room because you only had 2 outfits. You had what you wore to work and what you wore for Sunday best. So you didn't need to put stuff in a wardrobe. You just put whatever you weren't wearing onto the peg. So if anything, I hope by the end of this session, what people walk away with is the thought, and I've catchphrased it just as the churn is the concern. We get through far too much clothing. And yeah, I mean, sorry to disappoint people really early in the podcast, but that's it. And I am saying that with caveats in that the individual impact of clothing is relatively small. Clothing also has a wonderful ability to make us all unbelievably happy. And I don't mean that shopping has become a leisure activity. It has unfortunately become a leisure activity. But when you get shouted at, when you're feeling down, it's so easy and so fast and so convenient to buy clothing now that lifts our spirits. And if we're going to sort out this world for us all to live on, we need to have happiness within this world. And sometimes clothing makes us, clothing always makes us proud of our appearance, of who we are, and it reflects our values. So we've got to walk a reasonably tight line between what's good for the planet and what's good for ourselves.
You touched on so many things there, Charles. I want to go deep into lots here. But you're so right. I always talk about how textiles and clothing have the power to not just fulfill our senses, but our soul as well. And that's what you just mentioned here. And we'll go a bit more into it. So can we drill down a little deeper on this idea of emotional durability? What is it? Because it's a little more sort of hard to get your hands around, isn't it? Like it's not something concrete and it's personal and it's individual. So how do we explain this concept? And then how do we design for this?
Well, the good question you've asked, and I'm going to answer it in several parts. You've got to accept that everyone in this world has a footprint, and our footprints always count. And it was Mike Berners-Lee who first floated the really practical idea that we shouldn't look to have a minimal footprint. If we just look at reducing our footprint each year, and he started off pointing out that most of us have a footprint of between 10 and 15 tons of carbon dioxide. If we can just reduce that by a third to start with, we will make massive changes. So the idea of emotional durability is to keep clothing for longer, but that clothing has to be clothing that you want to be seen wearing. And in the 90s, at the end of the 90s, the grunge look really worked well to this. But we also had the acceleration by textiles. I do a lot of work within denim, how people were pre-aging jeans. And I have a pair of salvage jeans that you wear them for 6 months, for 180 days before you wash them. And that way you get the marvelous effects of them. And as long as you know how to care for them during those 6 months, which is the tip, turn them inside out, hang them on the line outside, and actually the UV will kill the bugs, the things that make them smell. But you learn tricks like this. You can put them in the freezer temporarily, and that will also make them hibernate. But so what I'm trying to say is look to buy what's been classed in the world as slow fashion. So items which are reasonably timeless that will go forward. And in something like sportswear, which is where I concentrate, there's an awful lot of slow fashion because we don't want to keep up with the trends. We're using reasonably expensive materials, so we're focused on their performance. And if we need to dress them up, like if we're in a certain team, we'll wear a particular tabard or we'll put colours onto it. But is your core garment something that you can see yourself wearing in not just a year, but I'm talking 5 years, I'm talking 10 years. I still have some shirts from Patagonia that are not made from organic cotton. Now, Patagonia switched their production to organic cotton 28 and a half years ago.
Oh, wow.
So that just shows the durability of cotton shirts if you treat them properly. Proper shirts rather than t-shirt. But also on that subject, I've become a bit of a nerd. And if I make the excuse now, sometimes talking to Charles is about as exciting as watching paint dry. I've become a specialist on using washing machines to get the maximum performance out of washing machines. And I've cheated a little bit in that I know what piece of advice I'm going to give at the end of this podcast recording.
Excellent. I love that. Can't wait for it. So we've talked about that emotional durability on the side of the consumers to want to keep it for longer. How do designers, you are teaching young people to be designers, how do they think about this concept and design that into the garments that they're making? Is that possible?
It is. It's really possible. People would like clothing that is personal to them. One of the big I'm doing a lot of work in Asia at the moment. If you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago about the expansion of the Chinese middle class, around 2010, they started to get paid a minimum wage. They now have the largest middle class in the world and the fastest growing middle class in the world. And right now, we're recording this on April the 4th. We've had the American tariffs coming out. And I was in China 3.5 weeks ago. And to tell you the truth, the Chinese are not bothered about selling to the Americans. The Chinese actually want to make clothing for their own nation, and they're really proud to. But that's going off subject. What I want to say about personalization, 15 years ago, there was this fear that what we were wearing would be seen on 100 people throughout the rest of, or in 100 different countries around the world. Whereas people just want something slightly more personalized. There are lots of breaking brands that I would choose to support because, especially, I work at several trade fairs. The last thing I want to do is walk around a trade fair with a backpack that's made by one of the brands there, because then people say, oh, you're owned by such and such a brand. So I'm always trying to find a nerdish brand, but it's quite hard to find a nerdish brand that isn't widespread, but also is a wonderful design. And pure design is brilliant. And all I'm trying to say to my students the whole time is stop compromising. Stop trying to design for everyone. Design for a role and you will bring in an audience. And I am a big fan. I do a lot of work in Scandinavia of clean Scandinavian designs. So my backpacks are relatively simple and they perform. And I apply that mantra to the clothing. Although I'm a clothing specialist, it's easier for me to talk about it outside of clothing.
Can you give us an example of a designer who's really very successfully managed to translate these ideas of durability, all for both, physical, emotional, cultural, and fit?
Yes, I mean, the one that springs to mind, if you were watching The Apprentice last night, he was almost on The Apprentice because they were using one of the sites that he helped to develop. It was the E20 site in East London. And the guy's name is Christopher Rayburn, a real star, good graduate of the Royal where I work, because his start point is waste. And it's a really simple mantra. Why are we producing more materials when we have enough waste materials already on the planet? And I know when I speak to other people, the quotes I'm getting is that we have between 6 and 8 generations worth of apparel already on the planet. If I turn that into timescales, that means that no one needs to buy any clothing for 150 years. That just sums up the overproduction we have. But I am proud to work in the sports industry where we work very closely with using recycled materials. And one of the projects I work on is something called Performance Days, which is an ingredient sourcing show. And we are changing the rules of the judging committee. We have over 1,000, I think we're up to 2,500 at the last show, 2,500 material samples to examine to see whether they should be put onto the champion part of the stage in the fabric forum. And we're going to change the rules to say that if you're submitting recycled materials, they must be textile to textile recycled materials. Our industry has been brilliant for stopping waste plastic bottles going to landfill. But to tell you the truth, that's a bit of a waste of PET, that type of plastic. That and the big soft drinks manufacturers have now agreed to integrate that waste plastic back into the feed for bottles. The Gen Z expect their plastics to be recycled. So that's good because we're not downgrading that version of plastic. My industry at the moment is scrabbling around saying, we've got over 90%. We think it's over 95% of the rPET feedstock is going to disappear before the end of this decade. What can we do to replace it? So there are lots of projects going on and things like biopolymers, polyamides, in really simple terms. Starch. If you take starch, what's left of a corn plant or a potato plant or a sugar beet plant, so you take out the fruit, which is of course the nice bit you like to eat, and the rest is actually polylactic acid or PLA. PLA is a type of polyamide, and if I translate that into English, nylon is a type of polyamide. So we can create a synthetic garment using waste from plants, which is now starting to get people thinking. And I hope I'm not turned too boring too early.
No. This is brilliant. This is definitely the kind of meat that we want to chew on. It's interesting that you said we have enough garments for the next 150 years, right? But that's not going to sit very well with brands because they do want us to buy. So how are they tackling this and approaching this?
well, brands are not tackling it really well, to answer the question quite simply. But there was a whole new generation, and it's being driven by Gen Z, who realise that we must change the business model. At the moment, we make the most and the easiest profits by selling new stuff. And I was at a fashion supply session earlier this week on AI, and it was just all about how can we sell more virgin stuff easier. And I just left it feeling really pungent, because the interesting brands to me are the ones who are making just as much profit, and profit is a vital part of the whole thing. They're making just as much profit by selling less stuff. And the formula that you've got to suddenly go, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Whether they're renting garments, whether they're reselling their own garments, whether they have a subscription service, there are lots of ways to play with it. To shout out a British brand right now, Rab, who do the big puffy down jackets, they have experiments in every single avenue that you can think of to do with earning money by selling less stuff. So they're swapping the models. They're offering care services, repair service, loan services, and the such like, to see which one becomes the most profitable, because we are at the early stage. And from a design point of view, you iterate, you try different things, and you expect lots of failures. But what failures are balanced out by which ones are gold dust? So to go back to this question again, how can brands rest with peace in mind? The fact that will make them come alive to it is that Gen Z will not work for them unless they care about the location on the planet, their status as an influencer. And if they are still doing bad things for the planet, and right now, apparel is bad. Apparel is really bad. And to throw another statistic to you, organic cotton, which is used by so many fashion brands to be their get out card, as but we're using better materials. Organic cotton, the GOT scheme, has been around for 30 years minimum. We're still closer to 1% of the world's cotton crop is organic than 2%, which is a really heart-stabbing type comment. We have lots of ways to spin good stories, but so many of them are just stories and they're not embraced in their entirety.
You mentioned that Gen Z are the ones sort of driving the change and pushing the brands to make change. You travel around a lot around the world. Is that conversation happening everywhere? I hear that conversation is really important here in Europe and UK, but been to Asia recently. I'm not hearing young people sort of worry about this as much. So are we in a bit of a bubble here, or is this a bigger conversation?
I wouldn't dispute it. If we look at the politics of North America at the moment, we have climate deniers going on. But it's not just Gen Z, it's also the millennials, and the millennials were the best people to flag it up. But in a really crude, generic way, millennials pointed it out and complained and then went to action. Gen Z have just gone, there's not enough time to complain or to blame. We need action, and they're just getting on with the new action. So it is not just the Gen Zs. If it hadn't been for the millennials starting it and embracing it, then the progress wouldn't be made. There were some phenomenal projects going on, and one that springs to mind at the moment, and tell me if this is inappropriate right at this moment. I've already said that all this millennium, textiles have become less bad. So every year we've made them slightly less evil. At the start of this millennium, we actually came across technology that allows us to have textiles that do good for the planet. Not less bad, but they actually have a positive acid to the planet, which is something to get your head around. And if I can go into detail on two of these things now, this is almost like the philosophy of clothing. So don't expect to get this immediately. The most acceptable version is what we call regenerative agriculture. which is where you grow a plant that puts more back into the ground than you take out. And to sum this up reasonably briefly, when we were 12 or 13, we learnt about photosynthesis, and we learned carbon dioxide goes into plants and oxygen comes out. So this carbon is sequestered away from the oxygen and it goes somewhere. But when we were that age, none of us asked what happens to the carbon. And we're on a planet at the moment, we have a fixed amount of carbon. The more that we can sequester into the ground, so store away from the atmosphere, the better. The more that goes into the atmosphere, whether it's methane or carbon dioxide, that is the greenhouse gas that has the terrible effect on the planet and the 1.5 degree temperature rising and the such like. So that carbon during photosynthesis forms the foliage, so the leaves or the roots of the plant, which is why something like a tree is pure carbon. And we can tell that because as the trees fell down millions of years ago and got squashed, that's what our coal is. So that's regenerative agriculture. It's a way of growing crops so that you're having long roots within the ground. And you can also have meat that comes from a regenerative agricultural source, but you're growing grass. And in crude terms for grass, if the animals graze the grass down to the sod, down to the soil, the roots will be correspondingly short. If you move the animals on a regular basis, the roots of that plant will be very long, and in the roots there's more carbon sequestered. So I've already talked about the animal side, so we have plant side. If we grow cotton, we can now easily grow regenerative agricultural cotton. To go back to what I said about organic, one of the big hiccups of organic, by the way, is brilliant, but it's not a perfect route. To switch from a regular cotton crop to an organic cotton crop, you have to be chemical free for 3 years. 3 years is an awful long time for a cotton farmer because the volume of their crop goes down. They're still being paid the old price of it because they aren't yet organic. And after 3 years, they can start to charge more. Well, when we look at regenerative agriculture, if we're using something like the EOV, which is from the Savory Institute, the way of calculating the number of microbes within the soil, which you want to see the improvement of, you can have regenerative agricultural status after 1 year. So this allows for better charging, which means that the transaction isn't so hard. And by the time you've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, if you've done it properly and you are chemical free, you can actually obtain regenerative organic agricultural status. So there's some really good news going on. So that is how plants are pulling carbon out of the air and keeping it locked within the planet, which is good for us all. But we can also do crazy stuff with synthetics. So Charles just takes a really big breath and goes, what? In really simple terms, and these experiments have been going on in Iceland, and we now have projects in the southern states of America, and it's essentially what looks like a really big air conditioning unit. And in Iceland, the energy is free of charge. They have so much geothermal, and in this country we've got lots of wave and we've got lots of wind, so we can run the same. So carbon dioxide goes in. They've reversed the system just like you do with photosynthesis. So the carbon is sequestered out and oxygen is returned to the air. Now that carbon, originally, they were just going to bury it under the ground, have basically carbon bricks and just bury them in old caves. But the clever people have worked out that can form the start of the polymer, or in English, we can create a skeleton of a synthetic yarn off it. So we can create a polyester using this carbon. So that will translate into English. We can polyester that is doing good for the planet. which...
Wow, that's a bit of a statement.
Yeah, if we said this 10 years ago, they would say, Charles, we're showing you to the loony bin because you're just talking a different language. And I am very aware, I work in the industry that has championed fleeces. And we all know fleeces are not perfect. And we're poisoning too many fish in the sea. We're going to come to the bit on pollution, hopefully, later in this conversation. But we now have polyester fleece that can do good for the planet. So the excitement, the amazing technical things which are going on within materials right now gets me so excited, and this is why I'm really involved. And if the conversation goes further, I'll also talk about biodyes, biopolymer dyeing, which will just blow your head yet again.
Yeah. I know. I mean, the reason I started this podcast is because there's such fascinating, mind-blowing innovations bubbling up in the textile and fashion industry. And like you said, there's just so much to look forward to.
It's a damn exciting time to be involved in it, without any shadow of doubt.
Yeah. But for all of that excitement to really translate into the real world and make an impact, I think we have a long way to go. So what are some of the hurdles that we still have to get over to really see the impact, very tangible impact of these new materials and technologies that are transforming the industry?
I've just been talking about better materials. Actually, better materials become negated, become redundant if we stop consuming so much and we just use what waste is already on the planet. I can quote something to you like 96% of the oil that we extract from the ground is either buried or burnt within 1 year of its extraction. So whether we turn it into polyester clothing, whether we put it in fuel in the cars or whatever, that is a horrendous figure. And I am an advocate of let's just use an awful lot of waste. At the moment, we're still burying a lot of synthetics within the ground. And I just want to stop us burying synthetics and to actually start using them for textiles. So whereas I've talked about textiles which are doing good for the planet, I'm hopefully not having to go there, because I am just literally collecting old bits of plastic and turning them into new polymers. And when we chemically recycle them, they are essentially as new. So we get the great effect out of them.
A lot of the conversation about sustainability and circularity is around that. Like, how do we switch these materials out? How do we reuse them? But a lot less is about the brands producing a lot less and consumers buying a lot less. It feels like, they want us to keep buying more and more. And that's what they're brilliant at doing, is to tell the story, to get us to buy more. And there's new trends, there's new colorways, there's new, every 3 months, there's something new that they give us and we want it. How do we sort of challenge that and push back on that? It's great that the products are made better with better materials, but that's still not a sustainable way to keep going. Your thoughts on that for brands?
Millie, you've asked the $1,000 question or the million quid question. We're not succeeding on that. We know what is right, but we are not going to it. And that's the problem. The best light that I see is these brands are being led by younger and younger people, and especially their workforce now, trying to recruit people into their workforce. Their new employees will only work for brands that have a responsible attitude. I wish it was a simple answer and I could give you a formula. But what I know about sustainability is we know how bad we are currently. We know what we must move away from, but we don't actually know where we're going. We know we're going to better. And if I was to compare it to the sat-nav, if you were to start off in London heading for, Stirling, you would know that you've got to go north. And as you're going up the M1, the sat-nav would actually be reading the traffic flows, and it might throw you across to Birmingham and go up via Glasgow because of new information coming. How this is relating to textiles, we know where bad is. We know what we must move away from, which in the car is London. But we must also accept that where we're going, the route's going to be revised on the way. There's a lot of work that we're doing which is going down rabbit holes, which is not good. And some of the biopolymers, so I was talking about creating new synthetics from waste materials of the agricultural industry, right now, we're still not growing enough food for the population of this planet. And to me, it's quite a straightforward choice. We have 8 billion people on the planet, a billion of which live below the nutritionally poverty level, which is an ethical choice, which I am not proud of. We must concentrate actually on feeding more people right now than clothing people. What I'm trying to say is that it's not a clear path. We don't know the path, we know the direction. And at exactly the same time, when this all comes down like a massive weight on your shoulders, and then suddenly something flashes up on your phone and you go, hold on, I can buy that shirt and I can wear it to work next week. And buying that shirt is actually going to be cheaper than a round of 4 drinks on a Friday night. And I can buy it faster than queuing at the bar. And that's going to make me happier than just having a drink on a Friday night. That's what I'm trying to say. We know where we should be going. We know what we need to do, but it is not an easy path. If there was a formula, we would apply that formula. Biggest hiccup in the formula at the moment is that brands make their most amount of profit by selling new stuff. And they answer to shareholders. They do not have to answer for an ethical point, although the EU Green Deal coming in is really going to put the morals of the clothing trade to test. And I am so chuffed at the EU Green Deal. Technically, it's not going to apply for this country, but any brand, and I think all the brands I deal with sell abroad, are going to have to conform. And we've only got to go back to the PFC debate and how it's now a banned additive. And that started, I believe, in Norway, and it was passed through their parliament during the summer period when most people were on holiday. So that's a country of 5 million people. They passed it. And the rest of Scandinavia realized, oh, we've got to get abroad. We've got to get on board for this because we just can't. Brands can just produce product only for Norway. And then the Germans, who have normally dominated better practice within Europe on chemicals, they got on board as well. And with Europe on board, that prompted America to change as well. So there have been some really good signs because happening of it. And it was literally the small country of 5 million have enabled change to the rest of the world.
And part of that is the extended producer responsibility that they're trying to drive through as well, isn't it? And that brings us nicely to that whole re-economy that we're exploring, which is repair, resale, rental, reuse. Could you share a bit of what you've seen around what brands are doing? I know you mentioned a couple of examples, but where they've really been able to succeed, not just in trialing it, but also making it a profitable part of their business, because otherwise they're not going to continue doing it. Are you seeing any examples of that?
Yes, there are. And I'm going to use the P word, and I try my hardest not to use the P word. If I ask my students, can you give me an example of an ethical clothing brand or a brand doing things properly, they will all come back and say Patagonia. Patagonia are brilliant at communicating what they do. Their practice is also pretty good, but there are brands, certainly within Europe, whose practice is better than Patagonia's. It's just they don't have the momentum and they don't have the international reputation. I can quote Scandinavian brands like Houdini Sportswear that we can barely buy within this country. I can quote Valde within Germany.
Are they sort of exploring repair, or is it resale, rental? What kind of models are they looking at?
They're doing the whole variety, and there are brands now that have their own sponsored eBay channels for resales. Patagonia originally did free repair. In fact, Worn Wear, which is the name of their project, is actually a free service. But not only that, when you have fallen out of love with the clothing, so the emotional durability is worn through, if you return it to Patagonia, they will refurbish it, give you a credit, and then sell it on to someone else. So they have resale platforms. The one I admire the most is Rab. Rab is part of a holding owned by Equip, and they actually have a full service facility. So they're very keen to take your garments back in And technical clothing, you've got to wash slightly differently to other clothing. So they will wash it for you, they will repair it if their bit's wearing out. But depending on how long you want this podcast to go on for, I could go through all 9 different types of R status.
Tell us about it, Charles. Tell us.
Well, okay, we've got repair, and there are several brands repair. In fact, almost every outdoor brand now, if you return the item to them clean, by the way, will repair it. Most of them do it free of charge. Then we've got refurbishment, so it's revitalizing the product back to its original status. So you have things like, for waterproof clothing, we finish all our products with something called a DWR, durable water resistant finish. This gets contaminated by several sources, whether it's your own sweat from the inside or smog and dirt from the outside. So how can we clean that to make it work again? Especially now we've changed the chemicals, so the new chemicals aren't as long performing as the old chemicals. So that's all around PFCs. Then we have changing the business model. Yes, are we going for resale? Are we going for a subscription model? And a classic one is, when I grew up, when we went skiing, we all used to go to the ski resort, and we used to hire our skis at the ski resort because no Brits really wanted skis for 51 weeks of the year. And if I look at a project based in Annecy at the moment called Reaction Collective, action, and then collective, that's actually run by a Brit. And what he did is that he went to the ski resort down there, Chamonix, and at the end of season, there were ski schools and other interests who had corporate uniform that were being changed for the next year. And they literally just used to landfill them. So he had a word. He not only got the gear that hadn't been issued, he also got the gear back from the instructors, because the instructors don't want to chuck away good gear, but they've got to wear the new colours the next year. So they refurbished them, they cleaned them, they washed them, and then they actually covered the logos so that they could be worn by other people. And he started as a community company, so he was making money from selling that product on a much reduced rate. And if you couldn't afford it for the local kids, they could borrow the clothing free of charge to learn to ski. So, there were just all these wonderful tips. And I can talk about people like Arc'teryx, the big Canadian top of the mountain brand, very hard. Don't want to talk about sustainability because people think sustainability is not, performance enough. But all their employees want the brand to be better. So they are the full speed test bed of Gore-Tex, which is the biggest material in the outdoors. And they're made in Canada themselves. So throughout the year, whenever you cut a pattern, you have waste on that pattern, and that is just put to one side. So what they do at Arc'teryx, it's called the Rebird Project, or it's part of Rebird. In October or September, all the machinists turn up to work on a weekend. They know they're not going to get paid, and they actually make new rain capes, so ponchos, out of all the waste Gore-Tex. So the next month, they go round all the hobos, all the street population in Vancouver, and give them these free rain goggles, basically. So if you ever want to see the best Gore-Tex, the latest stuff before it's released on the market, become a bum within Vancouver. And that's the solution to that. But this is the effect on that for Arc'teryx, is that their staff churn has shot down because people are proud to work for the company. It's not just about being on top of the mountain and surviving. It's about having your place within the community.
And another great, powerful tool that brands have is their storytelling, is their marketing. And they use that so brilliantly to share their values and get people to buy more. They can equally use that really powerful tool to help people think differently and just tell a new story.
I agree, but as a design lecturer, something I would say is that people come on board when they see nicer product, to use a very cheap expression. When they own nicer product, then they will consider nicer ways to do things. So if you want the behavior change, which is where emotional durability fits, which is what we want, people want a token to help them on their way to begin with. So the ultimate objective is behavior change, but we're doing it by introducing better products.
Absolutely. Do you believe that digital product passport can enable longer use and circulation of garments? Because Europe is sort of implementing that really with the hope, not of just telling you how the garment was made and where it came from, but really encouraging people to repair and reuse and resale and make that process much easier. What are your thoughts if that's going to make a difference?
If I go back one stage before the DPP, right now, the DPP, we know 95% of what's going to be in it. Although the longer term has been set, the legislation's been set, we don't actually agree the small print, or rather Europe doesn't agree the small print until towards the end of this year. So just beware for those people in the industry, people who are coming to you saying, I have DPP solutions. Nobody knows what the solution is because the parameters haven't been set yet. But yes, I do. But I'm going to go back one stage to another British company before DPPs. There's a brand in Wales that makes jeans in Wales. It's called Hyatt Denim, and they have free repairs for life. Now, their jeans are pretty expensive, but my last set of jeans from them went back 3 times to be repaired. And when I mean repair, I don't mean rips. That was more my style and my, and where I was from. I'm talking about physically wearing the material out on my thighs because of the material being rubbing through. From where I was putting my hands in the pockets and the pockets start to fray. They were refurbishing them free of charge, and they still do that. So there is culture change, but when Hyatt first came onto the market, they would actually show you a picture of the roll of denim of where the jeans were created from. They would introduce you to the personalities, like the person on the inside pocket of those jeans. It is signed by the person who has physically sewed the jean together.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I'm in a lucky situation. I've actually been to meet them as well. So, yeah. There's storytelling, and storytelling produces greater emotional durability without any shadow of doubt. And also, people are proud when they have their stuff repaired, and they will actually wear it for even longer. So many people are living in a single-use world that when something wears out, you just immediately replace it. But if you could repair it for them, especially with a lot of the active stuff that my group wears, because it was the first time they climbed a 10,000 meter peak they want that to be in their wardrobe. I mean, I still have a gig t-shirt in my wardrobe from 1982 because I was so proud of it. That doesn't quite fit, but no way am I giving it up because the emotional durability of it is so strong.
Absolutely. This is one question that I've asked all my guests on my podcast. Tell me about a story of a textile or a clothing or an item that you've kept for a long time because it's got that deep connection and meaning and value to you. I was going to ask you that question later on, but now that we've talked about this, let's dive in, because I've had the most fascinating stories from each of my guests. And this is what started my exploration of emotional durability in our industry. But I'd like to hear your story, Charles. Tell us one.
I've got a variety, and I'm not going to talk about that U2 t-shirt from 1982. Okay, I'm going to talk about a pair of flip-flops, which people go, what? That's disposable clothing. What are you on? I was fortunate because I write columns within the industry. The Canadian brand who was going to launch a product approached me, and they asked me about these things, and they said the only hiccup, Charles, is that this product, if it was in today's money, it would be over £50, and flip-flops you buy for £5. It was very curious. I have now had those flip-flops for, if we're in 2025 now, I've had them for 19 years and they still get worn because they have been well crafted. They are not soft. I can actually resole them, so I can put a new tread on them. because the flip-flop you're not wearing socks with, you actually get the detritus from your skin going direct onto the material. So they will smell a bit more. But as I hinted earlier, I am that sad guy who knows how to do washing machines. So I know how to get rid of the smells. And there's special sandal wash from a brand called Nick Wax. So there are lots of little things that you can do it. But yeah, the flip-flops to me, they're light, they're simple, and I go away, I do an awful lot of traveling. So I'm normally in my work pair of shoes, and I just love getting out of my work shoes and having my set of flip-flops. Just makes it so. It's the small things in life that just make you smile.
How long have you had this pair for?
18 years.
Oh, wow.
And they're fine. And the thing I'm most proud of is they don't smell.
Yeah,
because I treat them
that
every
is an
3
achievement.
months.
Yes, you should definitely write a book about this on how to wash and clean clothing. I think that's going to be.
If we are going to go into washing and clean, just a quick diversion on that. There are lots of ways to refurbish using washing machines, which I thoroughly approve of. But most people don't set up their washing machine in the right way. And when I mean set up the washing machine, when we buy a washing machine, there are generally 3 ways to install it. And I'm not going to ask you a direct question, Millie, because I remember I sit on the all-party parliamentary group for fashion and textiles. And when this was put to us, 25 people were in the room who were all meant to be textile specialists. Only 2 people in the room did this. So not even textile specialists were aware of this. They asked, how often do we service wash our washing machine? And everyone went, what do you mean service wash? And a service wash is when you flush out the machine, highest possible temperature, nothing on the inside, and it's to get rid of the detergent gunk. So you know when you put your finger in the rubber ring of the door seal and you feel it, that means you have too much detergent gunk going on. We know the sewers at the moment are full of fat, baby wipes and excess detergent. We use too much detergent. You can either run the machine with nothing in, so just add water and let it flush itself. You can use Vanish, one of those additives to clean, but actually the best one out for me is half a cup of vinegar, which will cost you, 25p? Run it later. And what will happen is after you've done that within your machine, now when you wash at 30, it will actually clean. Because all of us went onto that campaign, which was about 2013, 2014, wash at 30 unless it's really dirty, but it never cleaned our clothes well enough. If you service your machine, you will be able to run your machine at a lower wash temperature, but this is the reason why you're now going to do it later tonight and run your machine on this service wash. When you first installed the machine, there were 3 ways to install it. Cold water pipe here, plug there, that's all I need to know. Standard bloke, stupid way. More intelligent, use that folded bit of A4, which told you exactly the same. These are the basic programs. This is where you put cold and all the rest of it. If any of us read the Bible that comes with washing machines, the 150-page book, it will tell you in there, if you do a service wash every 50 washes, your machine will last twice as long. Now I've told you that, if you've ever had to buy a £250 machine because your machine is broken, you'll get, hold on, it lasts twice as long. You will now do a service wash tonight.
Tip of the day. This is how we do it here on our podcast.
Without PR, sorry. But yeah, when you've got a clean machine, then when you apply the cleaning fluids for waterproof garments or even the reproofing fluids, they work a lot better. Talking with Charles is just so random. Apologies. And
I love it.
I hope those listening, they're either cartooning me as a crazy person or they're just going, brain exploded. I need to put everything back in order.
Oh, no, I think it's definitely brain exploding. So to pick your brains a bit more, you just recently wrapped up at Performance Days, was I think last month. You were telling us about that. What are sort of 3 big inspiring takeaways you had from the show?
Okay, 3 big inspiring takeaways. For the first time, we ran a session before Performance Days called Day 0, and I got 100 fabric people in the room designers and technical staff, along with 20 of the best CSR, and I just let magic happen. There was a real need where people, what CSR, corporate social responsibility, who do the ESG, the environmental social governance, there was so much open sharing. The industry has got to the stage where it realizes, and when a brand like Patagonia openly say this, that they do not want to develop the best solution, they want to do it cooperatively. Then you know the willing is in the room to help. All the people want to do it, and magic just happen. And because I work in a design school, I know a good way to turn off all my designers is to just present a lecture to them. So we had lots of panels and workshops, and it just gelled, and the conversations have gone in much further detail. So day zero was one thing. The second thing was that we created a wool forum. Wool is an amazing fiber. The keratin fiber, it's a natural fiber. It's a waste product of the meat industry, just like leather is a waste product of the animal industry. And I've looked at wool in a bit more detail than most people. And if I want to compare it to down, or I want to compare it to polyester or cotton or viscose, if I compare it on one or two scales for insulation or thermoregulation or stretchiness, it will quite often lose against whatever is the best of the others. But wool comes second or third in 15 different categories. No other fiber does what wool does. And the one thing it champions better than anything else is that it's antibacterial. In New Zealand, when you have a Band-Aid to put on an open wound, the gauze is made out of wool. It is that antibacterial. So it will just change your thinking. So yeah, wool was another great thing. And then we also had lots of progress in the area of next to skin, base layer, underwear, whatever you want to call it. Most of the iconic images of the performance sports mark about waterproof shell on the outside. We've seen the popularity of the fleece and the insulation levels. Talking of which, as the planet's getting hotter, the more interesting stuff is going to come in the cooling layers that you're wearing, not rather the heating layer. But right now, with base layer, there's some phenomenal stuff going on. And we uncovered a gem based in London, in Putney, in an old ice cream factory called the London Contour Experts, who seem to be on top of this. And very interestingly, they have realized that the base layers are becoming much more aesthetically pleasing, so much more fashionable. And what I mean by that is we're now in a society where we show more of our undergarments. So they've gone from being practical items to actually now having a bit of style. And the area, without sounding too weird, but then most of the audience realize Charles is slightly weird, I have done lots of work in bras. And there is a new material, and it's developed by a London company called Rheon Labs, RHEON, and it's a non-Newtonian material. Don't expect to know what non-Newtonian means. It just means it's not act like Newton's laws of physics. What it is, they've created a film, and when we had a thicker version, it was called D30. D30 we could make into something like a pair of cricket pads. It was a soft putty until something hit it hard, and it immediately turned into an exoskeleton and it spread the load around. So a snowboarder could wear a beanie rather than a full crash helmet, and their head would be as protected if they fell over. They've now been able to do it on a very thin film level, Rheon Labs, and the British athletics team had this at the Paris Olympics last year. They used it on the quads and thighs of their running pants, but also on sports bras, because sports bras have traditionally been designed for women of larger busts to hold in fat, sorry to be crude, but smaller chested women have just as much agitation, they have just as much up and down, and sports bras to them have almost constricted their breathability. The compression has been too much. With a Rheon Labs film, what happens is that it's a soft bra when you wear it. The more you jump up and down, the more that it holds you. So,
wow, that is mind-blowing.
So yeah, this is why there's so much excitement going on in the world. And I'm also really lucky in that, from a design point of view, so much is still originated within this country.
Well, you started to touch on this. My next question was, over the next 5 to 10 years, what can we look out for in the outdoor and sportswear industry? What can we expect, and what's the vision?
The vision's actually something quite simpler. What I've been talking about is very much product. We're going to change why we're doing it. One of the things which is just coming to mind at the moment certainly this decade, is that, yes, we need to sort out our own fitness, but everyone has moved the conversation because of COVID. Fitness is two elements. It's physical fitness and it's mental fitness. And I can quote you several authors who are actually going forward, doctors, respective academics, saying that if you're feeling a bit down, and it's right, we all have ups and downs. And sorry, I don't want to shy away from these awkward subjects, but going for a walk in fresh air just makes you so much happier. It's not the question of taking a pill to get back to a good state. I think that the whole nature of active movement, especially now that we have become such a car society, I like the rise of e-bikes because that's getting people more out into the elements. I still use a traditional bicycle, but then I'm a grumpy person with grey hair, so I feel that you must suffer. But it's getting people out to enjoy life and the community and the experience. Sport is not. I mean, I do not wear that much lycra, but I am not a mammal, a middle-aged bloke in lycra. Sport to me is doing it for the fun. That's where I feel sport's going to be a lot more. And I would also say the more that we do activity in sport, not only is it good for the body, it's good for the mental side. We're reducing the NHS bill here within the UK. We're embracing a more open and inclusive sport and activity, and also not encouraging that you only do it if you're going to be the best, going to be elite. And I'm actually quite chuffed in that I know my way around the UK an awful lot. This is a magnificent country, and although we do have 4 seasons of weather each and every day, there's so much more in this country that I want to explore with my children. I don't want to go somewhere and climb a big mountain anymore. I just want to do things, and that regional economy needs some support from us.
I mean, it clearly, you're someone who loves the outdoors, and you used to work in the outdoors a lot more. You had a very interesting sort of career. If you could share briefly about your journey from being an outward bound instructor in the USA, and if you can tell us what that is, to being a performance sportswear design lecturer at RCA. It seems 2 very separate worlds.
Yes, but there is a pattern, and the more you understand about Charles, you realise it does not go straightforward. It's like finding the answer to sustainability. It's not in a straight line that we're expecting. I grew up in a military academy. I went to a military school where all my colleagues were sons of people within the military, not as officers, and most of them went into some form of service career. So whether it was with the military, whether it was with the police and such like. I unfortunately broke my neck a week before my O-level started. I'm that old, they were called O-level. But I'm fine. But it meant that I couldn't go through to the military, which is where I wanted. So in 1984, I left school and I had the first generation of round the world air tickets. And in those days, they had not written the rules for round the world air tickets. And I remember in the States, which was not a country I particularly wanted to go, but they said, where do you want to go? So I said, what's that big hole in the ground? Where's the mountain where they've carved the all the rest of it? I had 42 flight coupons just for the United States. And of course, they now give you rules that you're only allowed 2 or 3 per continent. So I ended up in America working at a summer camp for the first season. The next season, I was asked to join the Outward Bound school in the area, which was like a more professional version of it. And I went to their Florida one as well. So I was in New England during the summer, Florida during the winter. And I was really enjoying it. I had friends who did Outward Bound in the UK, but it was very competitive to get into. In America, it was a lot easier. And I came back to this country on December the 1st, 1986, and it was cold, it was dark, it was wet, and it was windy. And the only decision that has really made me happy in my life, I decided not to be an outward bound instructor, but to go into the clothing to keep the outward bound instructor happy. So I came back to Britain and thought, no, I like the vibe, but I don't want to get cold and wet. And then I have just been fortunate. I was recruited to the first ever Masters in Performance Sportswear Design, and I have been elevated on the way, and I now teach at a nice college. But the best work I do is actually when the graduates go into brands, and I work in that middle area, because they're taking in the new ideas and the new ways of thinking. And through experience, we've worked out the best way to get better practice is not to get massive corporate change, but to get people coming in, applying new systems like Clo and 3D design. You can take the risk and try and retrain the whole department, or you can just get one or two people who are brilliant at it, and it will naturally spread out because their colleagues will see what they're enabled to do. So there's an awful lot of this subtle way of educating.
I love it, Charles. You're sort of planting people in all the big corporates to change them. They don't even realize it.
They get their own jobs. And then I get phoned up by people in those corporates saying, Charles, what do we do? Because we don't understand what they're like.
Excellent. And where are you from, Charles, in the UK? Where did you grow up?
I came from a service family, so I was born in Scotland. I went to school in Dover. My parents lived in Chichester, so somewhere between near Portsmouth. So I grew up sailing. When I first got a job in the outdoor apparel industry, I went for a job in Chichester. They thought I was interviewing for a job in London, so I ended up commuting. And then I flipped to the Lake District because I was offered a job up there at a time when we didn't have 7 days a week shopping, and it was really, really strange. I lived in a village where, depending on what day of the week it was, you knew by who drove in. Like the baker drove in his van 3 days a week. The fishman came once a week. The veg man came 3 days a week. The meat man came twice a week. I mean, it was just such a change from living in the middle of London to going to this place. Yeah, I am fortunate. That's all I'm saying. I've not had a perfect journey, but I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Amazing, amazing. And when you were a young boy, say, I don't know, 12 or 13, if someone had asked you, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your answer?
Oh, I would have joined the military. Yeah, I grew up in a military family. My only brother's in the military. Both my parents were in the military. I went to a military school at 11. And then at 16, when I broke C5 in my neck, and they suddenly said that's not going to happen.
That must have been tough.
Yes, it is, but it's also opened magnificent other doors for me. So, life's not perfect. You get with whatever's on your plate.
Again, doing a bit of digging around. I've had pilots on the show before. Well, a pilot. She was a textile weaver, but she's also a pilot. But I've never actually had anyone who voluntarily jumps out of planes. And I understand you're a skydiver and you've done over 1,000 jumps. Is that right? Or did that?
It is. Well, your weaver is jealous of us because the planes we go up in are not always perfect, nice airline type planes. And when they have a problem, there's nothing more smug than the skydiver saying, you stay there, I'm going to go for help. I do it for the adrenaline rush, and this is why I make no secret that my carbon footprint is not the best in the world. But I equate the enjoyment that it gives me as something I'm willing to offset other things. I go to Europe an awful lot by train now, just because I need to offset it one way or the other. Yes, pilots look at us in very strange ways, and we look at them and they say, look, you guys are in a lunatic assignment, and we look at them and say, no, you guys are the lift operators in a lunatic asylum. Who's got the worst role? I do it because of the community, because of the fun, and I only did it because, having been a sailor on the south coast, when I moved to the Lake District, I was doing mountain work for my proper employment. So we were testing materials. And one of my friends said, look, why don't we jump out of a plane? And it just stuck for some reason.
Do you still jump? Is that allowed?
Yes. Oh, yes, very much so. Not as much as I used to. I was very keen and big when sky surfing came out. So someone thought we can jump out of a plane wearing a snowboard. And so I was there right at the start of that, when free fly was starting, but it was sky surfing. So right place, right time, and just living for it.
Amazing. Any scary jumps?
Oh yeah, I've had bad jumps. Yeah. But I've been rebuilt after them.
Oh wow. I mean, did you break bones? Is that a bad jump?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to have a drink and talk about that another time.
Broken fingernail, I think, was the most embarrassing thing. But, I'm someone, I break my body every so often and it repairs as well.
And it just fixes. Brilliant. Now, just kind of wrapping up a little and reflecting. You said your understanding of sustainability has changed and will continue to change, and it's evolved. Can you find points that have been really pivotal in that journey of understanding and developing your idea about sustainability and how it's evolved or crystallized?
That's one of those questions which I'm sure I will change my answer if you ask me in an hour or a day's time. But I did give a bit of thought to this beforehand, and I'm really lucky in that I realise that you are regarded as the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. So I tend to hang around people more intelligent than me. And that is often the students. The students are obviously brilliant. It's just I know how to do things. They have the creativity ideas. So I very much ride on their surf wave that they create. And the students, because I'm teaching them an aspect which they're unfamiliar with, like me, and it becomes a two-way process. But I am really lucky in that I recognise the value of listening and conversation. I try not to push myself forward. So, Millie, I am breaking my own rules here by being on your podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but the biggest source of information for me is I'm involved in a project called the Do Lectures, thedolectures.com, which, if you don't know it, it's like TED Talks, but it happens in Wales in a field, and it is just the most amazing sensation way to clear my brain. I go each year. Getting a ticket to the Do Lectures is exceptionally hard. You have to be screened to be allowed to apply for a ticket, and they always sell out on the first morning. I think it's 3.5 days. They make you sleep in a tent in Wales, and it costs several thousand. So it's quite a thing. And I've somehow become involved within the team there. And just having the conversations with people who see it better and are willing to try things. And as a designer, accepting that you will fail. It is good to fail. But if you don't fail, we continue along the path to bad. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. I also have a question for you that came from the previous guest that I had on my podcast. Her name's Victoria Nickerson. And her question to the next guest, she didn't know who it was, but this was the question she had. What's the best piece of advice you've been given, and perhaps how's that been used in your career to keep going forward?
Ask questions. Ask dumb questions. That's it. People are afraid. I moderate several shows, and we always have questions and answers at the end of the presentations. And people are embarrassed because when they don't get the concept, they feel that I've got this massive question, but I don't want to announce to everyone else that I don't know, the first level. So I try and ask the embarrassing questions first. It is always ask dumb questions. Presume nothing. Ask questions, and don't, although it's hard to get to this stage, don't be afraid to admit that you don't know, that you don't get it whatsoever. Ask the dumb questions, and what you'll suddenly feel is the energy from the room, because half the room will suddenly go, "We love you, Charles," because that's what I wanted to ask that I was afraid to ask. So yeah, ask dumb questions, and it will really help.
Ask dumb questions, and you said important to surround yourself with really intelligent people. Great takeaways. Yeah. Are you reading anything interesting right now? Any resources or books or podcasts that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I finished Mike Berners-Lee's new book, earlier this week coming back from London, and it has knocked me for six. If you don't know Mike Berners-Lee, he has a more famous brother, but we ignore his brother. His brother's been down at the Do Lectures. He's the type of person who comes to such events. Mike is the carbon footprinting specialist, certainly of this country, I would say, for Europe. He's just written a book called A Climate of Truth. His most well-known book is How Bad Are Bananas, which was the carbon footprinting of everything. Then he wrote There's No Planet B. He edited one of the chapters in Greta Thunberg's book, The Climate Book. But A Climate of Truth is just phenomenally, refreshingly honest, direct, and it will irritate and agitate. And I now subscribe to his philosophy that if we don't start to rebel more, we're going to continue on this path to doom. And whereas he says, look, I don't approve of any violent action, and to tell you the truth, Just Stop Oil aren't people I would support, but the way that they have modified their work to do something and get off their butts, they say, because what we have been doing is not working, so therefore we must do something else.
An amazing way to end the conversation. We have to take action. We can't be sitting back and watching things. And that's what you've been doing for the last 30 years. You've been moving forward. You've been having the difficult conversations. You've been getting people to collaborate. And yeah, I feel like you've been just doing a lot of experiments to see how we can get ourselves unstuck here. Thank you so much, Charles. Is there any question you wish I'd asked or anything else that you wanted to share?
No, not really. Trying to stay up with Charles, I know is not easy. But are there any questions I wish you'd asked? To me, the biggest thing, and I got to slip it in, is that it's important whilst you're here to have fun.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Charles. Such a brilliant conversation. My brain's exploded in all kinds of directions and absolutely enjoyed discussion.
It's been a two-way thing. Two-way, very much indeed.
Thank you so much for taking time to join me today and share so much of your experience and expertise, and for inspiring and encouraging us to keep moving forward, even if they're just experiments and we're all stumbling forward together. Wow, what an inspiring episode to get us started in the new year. That was a whirlwind tour of so many important topics in textiles and such a fun discussion. His energy is absolutely contagious, and I swear I could have talked to him for hours. I hope this conversation got you curious enough to go digging to learn more about emotional durability, sustainability through longevity, and designing for circularity. Charles mentioned a bunch of resources. I will pop these into the show notes below. Do check them out. And also, please follow him on LinkedIn. He posts regularly, and you can find out what he's up to and all the important things that are on his mind if you follow him on LinkedIn. I will definitely have him back for another episode that focuses on how we care for our clothing, when he clearly knows a lot about laundry. I guess it's a pretty mundane chore we do every week, but do we really understand what is going on and how best to wash our clothes to make sure they last longer? Hope Charles can come back and shed more light on this topic in a future episode. Well, that's all from me today. Thank you for joining me. Stay tuned for more episodes, and don't forget to subscribe for more conversations at the intersection of textiles, emerging tech, craft, and sustainability. Until next time, I'm your host, Millie Tharakin, reminding you that there's no such thing as ordinary cloth. Every thread tells a story.